Oh, hi! As promised in my blog post, this is video on how to use this mysterious little device called a Gaiwan. Means covered bowl. Invented in China ages ago, probably. Look in Wikipedia if you want the correct date. So a Gaiwan consists of three parts. The lid, which gives it the guy. There's a leaf stuck in there. Oh, it's gone. Good. Good riddance. And then the bowl itself, this is the business end, and then the saucer. The saucer is not necessary, but it's good for catching spills, but if you don't have a saucer, whatever. Gaiwan's usually made out of porcelain. They can be made out of stoneware, but stoneware ones heat up. They heat up slow and they retain a lot of heat, so you try to pick it up and it's a disaster. So you might as well, if you're going to use a stoneware vessel, you might as well just use a teapot. So the key to holding a Gaiwan when it's full of hot water, there's two ways of doing it. That's one finger. Two ways of doing it. You could either hold it like, well, you could either hold it like this and pour your tea like that, with the lid acting as a filter to keep the leaves in there. Or the way I do it is I just use it with one hand and decant like this, not onto a tea tray if it's full of tea, because then you're not being able to drink the tea, and that defeats the whole point. Why would you want to use a Gaiwan? For loose leaf teas that are of Chinese origin, pretty much any of them can be brewed in this thing. They're designed to be. Some of them do better in, say, a Yixing teapot, which will probably be another video, but these are way cheaper and way easier to use. Well, Yixings are not hard to use, but they're expensive as compared to this. This one is about $7, and it's good. I mean, it's not the best. Better ones are generally thinner around the lip here, and speaking of the lip, if you're going to be holding it by the lip, like, say, this, you can tell I'm not practiced in this method. If you're holding it like that, obviously you don't want the water, hot water, coming up all the way to the lip, because then you're going to burn your fingers, and that sucks. I never really learned that lesson, hence why I use the one-hand method, which some people advocate is a little dangerous, but others, I've seen people do this, and I do it this way. So basically, brewing in a Gaiwan is not that much different than brewing in a teapot, except that your infusions are going to be much shorter, generally, and you get less tea, but at the same time, say, let's just do a little demonstration here. So say you pour your water in here. There's no tea in there, obviously, because I'm not wasting any tea on this. And there's a couple of ways you can decant, because sometimes you might not have, like, this is just a crummy glass teapot, which is extremely dirty, but I use this as a serving vessel, or a fairness cup, but some people use like an actual little pitcher, or you do use whatever you have on hand that holds liquid and can pour it. But there's two ways of doing this. One way, which I'm not that good at, is, so when you're pouring out, you make sure you just have a little hairline crack right there. Yes, thank you, camera assistant. And that way your leaves stay in the Gaiwan where they should be, and the water comes out, well, the tea comes out. So there's two ways of doing this. That water is surprisingly hot. Ow. If you want to make sure that the cups are pretty much even in their tea concentration, because obviously the bottom, where the leaves are, is going to be much more concentrated than the top. So what you're going to want to do is you pour like this. So you alternate. I didn't do it that well. That takes some practice. But if you don't have a serving pitcher, that's generally how you're going to want to do it. And then, of course, if you have a tea tray, you just go like that. A tea tray is not necessarily necessary. That's a stupid way of putting it. So we'll get those out of the way. And then the other way of doing it, which is the way I prefer, fill up with water, is just decanting into a fairness pitcher or a serving pitcher or this little teapot, which works pretty well. And there you go. And that way you have now, it's all mixed up. It would all be mixed up in there. And then you would just go like that, and everything is right with the world. You have fair tea. to serve your guests. I couldn't think of the word there, I'm sorry. This is about an appropriate size for a Gaiwan for 2 people. I have another one here. If the camera wants to follow me. And follow me back. This is a slightly larger one. I would say about 10 or 20% larger in volume. Usually when you're shopping for Gaiwans, they tell you what it is filled up to the rim. Of course, obviously you're not filling up to exact the rim or else it overflows when you put the lid on. So generally a vendor will tell you what it's like, actual volume, you know. This one is about 4 fluid ounces, which is somewhere less, about a little more than 100 milliliters. A little more than 100, thank you, camera assistant. This one being less so. This is about right for maybe 3 people, or 4 people, if you're using tiny cups, which you probably will be. You can get bigger than this, up to 150, 160 mils. Those are good for brewing for a larger amount of people, but at the same time, you're losing a lot of control that way. The smaller the better, generally, when it comes to making tea in this method. The Gaiwan itself is not particularly intimidating as a tool, I don't think. It's easy to use. It takes some practice. Practice with cold water first. And also clean your Gaiwan. This one is hideously dirty. Practice with cold water first. Then move up to using hot water, and then you can start using it to brew tea. So the way putting tea, you just basically, a lot of vendors that sell Chinese style, if you ask them, will tell you how much of a Gaiwan full to put in. Generally it's just covering the bottom without piling up. Some teas maybe use more or less if you're doing Yancha oolongs. Some of them you stuff it like 3/4 full, which, and considering how expensive Yancha can be, that's actually kind of unfortunate. But anyways, you fill up. So yeah, I mean if they can't tell you, then you're just gonna have to guess, I guess, because not everybody has a tea scale. I certainly don't, and I don't care. But and then some green teas you would brew with the lid off, just so that it doesn't stay too hot in there. And then some, like including a lot of white teas, you want to actually, if you're brewing it very hot, you want to keep the lid on. So if you want a higher temperature in there, keep the lid on. In general, you don't want to keep the lid on when the leaves are sitting in there, or else they'll stew, and that kind of screws up flavor. So just leave it off, and you'll be good to go. Another good thing is if you just leave it there, and then you want your aroma, you get it off the lid. You don't need to circle it around your nose like that. But that's just kind of like makes it look like you're actually doing something. See? I'm doing something, yes. Again, Gaiwans are cheap. Expensive ones are like $40, but you don't need a $40 Gaiwan, honestly. That one was $20, and this one's pretty good. I don't use it that often because it's a little too big. But $10 from a good place. I mean, you put in an order for tea, you throw a Gaiwan in there, you're not adding too much expense. And yeah, that's the Gaiwan for you. Get one, definitely, especially if you're brewing Chinese teas. Japanese teas don't work so well in these for some reason. They do better in specific kinds of teapots, or just brewing in a glass. I don't know why. And also some black teas, because they need a higher temperature, do better in teapots. But that's not a hard, fast rule. Some people brew Darjeeling and stuff in these, and it goes quite well for them. So experiment. And again, you probably will break some of these at some point. I haven't broken these yet, which is kind of incredible. But they're cheap. You can replace them easy, as long as they don't have lead in the paint. You know, it's pretty hard to get a bad one. I mean, you can get better ones, but meh. Starting out, something like this, $7, $10, just fine. So that's the very poorly done video on how to use a Gaiwan. If you have any questions, just message me and ask, and
I will answer them to the best of my ability.